You're not ever going to get it done, and you can't get it wrong. And the reason that you can't get it wrong is because you never get it done. You're always going to be in the place where you can move yourself up this emotional scale into vibrational alignment with who you really are. So here you are, non-physical energy, before your physical birth, and you are one powerful stream of pure positive energy. And then you're born. In the moment that you're born, your consciousness is introduced to the variety of the human earth experience. And in that moment, there is a slight separation of your vibration. That's why you cry when you're born. In other words, it's a bit shocking. You all worry about death. It's birth you should worry about. Death is a piece of cake. In other words, you die, you reemerge into pure positive energy. When you're born, now that's not easy. To come into an environment where people worry, where they don't like each other, where they fuss about things. So here you are, you're born, and you are now not quite the pure positive energy stream that you were. But then you sleep and you are. You wake up and you're not. You sleep and you are. You wake up and you're not. But you begin to acclimate, and even as that early infant, even when you're awake, you have the very powerful potential. It sort of depends on your environment of being that pure positive energy. But then you grow up and you go to school and they tell you what you're doing wrong, and they compare you with one person and another person, and you get more and more separated. The more you try to socialize with your physical world, the more most of you usually lose track of this, especially since people haven't been keeping you aware that you want to be aware of this. In other words, if when you're born, your mother is aware that you're pure positive energy and she's trying to coax you into that alignment, it's easier. But most people forget pretty soon, and so they're sort of hanging out there on the raw and ragged edge, responding to whatever their environment is showing them. So then you grow up. You have ups and downs. You go to sleep, you come into alignment. You wake up, you're out of alignment. You appreciate, you get back into alignment. You criticize, you get out of alignment. You love someone, you get into alignment. You hate someone, you get out of alignment. You watch a movie that feels wonderful, you get into alignment. You watch CNN, you get out of alignment. In other words, and then you learn to meditate, you get into alignment. In other words, you live life and sometimes get out of alignment. You croak, you go back into alignment. So you get the sense of this. You have the potential of maintaining that alignment once you know what you're looking for. So what you're looking for is alignment, and what alignment feels like is love and appreciation and joy. It feels like passion, feels like freedom. It's the perception really of freedom. And we use the word perception because you're so free you can choose bondage. No one can vibrate for you, so you're doing it all to you, whether you like it or not, whether you like what you're doing or not, you are doing it all to you. But on that end of the scale, it feels like freedom. On the other end of the scale, which feels like fear, it feels like despair, that is your perception of no power. That's your perception of no freedom. That's the feeling of disempowerment. The way you feel is your indication of where you are on this scale. Now, what's this scale? This scale is this crack that we're talking about, isn't it? It's that vibrational relativity between who you really are and not just who you were before you were born, and not just who you were the day you were born, who you have become as a result of being in this masterful, wonderful experience where life is causing you to become more. So have we made the point? You can't not keep up to speed with who you have become and ever feel good. In other words, life can't cause you to become this and you ever feel really good when you're over here beating the drum of this. You got to get up to speed with who you are. So how do you do that? You recognize that the way you feel, that the emotions that you feel are your indicator of how you're doing on this emotional scale. You recognize that when you make a statement and really mean it, nothing is more important than that I feel good, and then you make the effort to feel good, then you can get up the emotional scale on any subject that you want. And it's an interesting thing. We really want you to realize that you might see someone who's experiencing the trauma of the death of someone that they love, who's in despair. And then you might see someone else who seems to have everything in the world going right, who is feeling despair over something that seems utterly insignificant to you. You want to say, get a life, for heaven's sakes. Why are you so worried about that? And we want to say to you, lovingly, mind your own business. Because you don't know what anybody else is doing with their scale. In other words, you have no way of knowing what the vibrational relativity is for anyone else, just like no one else has any way of knowing what it is for you.